Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast. The P.A.S. Report provides an honest analysis on the critical issues that matter to you without the biased media filters. Here's your host, Professor Nicholas Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano, and today we are going to delve into a topic that has plagued our nation for far too long, and it's corruption within our government bureaucracy. I can't understand why more people aren't outraged about this, and why so many remain so quiet, because this is the biggest threat that the Republic faces. Unfortunately, we have a bunch of cowards in office that aren't willing to do anything to stand up to this authoritarianism that has crept into our society, where our bureaucracies have been weaponized to target political opponents. And in recent years, we have witnessed a disturbing trend of abuse of power within agencies. You talk about the FBI, you talk about our intel agencies like the CIA, the NSA, you talk about the Department of Homeland Security. These institutions tasked with protecting and serving the American people have instead been targeting people they don't like, people that they disagree with, political opposition, silencing brave whistleblowers who dare to expose their corruption. They have become thoroughly corrupted, and it is time that we begin to discuss how to rein in these agencies. Those that have been listening to this podcast know I've been warning about this. I've been warning about government abuses since our inception. It is our founding fathers' worst nightmare. They didn't want to see this overbearing, all-powerful government because they understood the abuses that would happen. And if you are a new listener, you will see that one of the main themes of this podcast is government abuses, because that's the greatest threat to the Republic. And it shouldn't matter what your political ideology is. You should stand up against this. When the nameless, faceless, unelected bureaucrats anoint themselves as the guardians of democracy, we have a major problem. And the unchecked bureaucracy, the erosion of our civil liberties, this is critical. There's a stunning disregard for the principles upon which our great nation was founded. I want to explore the disturbing revelations surrounding the all-powerful intel and law enforcement communities. It is clear that these agencies, under the guise of national security, they've overstepped their boundaries. They target those who dare to challenge their authority and call attention to these abuses. Guess what? You're not the ones that are in power. We, the people, are supposed to be the ones in power. But we, the people, have abdicated our responsibilities. We don't put any pressure on Congress to rein these agencies in. Very few people have paid attention to the national strategy for countering domestic terrorism. And forget Democrats. I'm talking about even Republicans and conservatives. I'm talking about even conservative news outlets. None of them really spoke about this document. None of them spotlighted it. There was only a handful. People like Tucker Carlson and Glenn Beck, Miranda Devine, John Solomon, they were on top of this document. But most others have remained silent. And yet this strategy actually changed a lot. And it's not like, when President Biden issued the strategy in June of 2021, this has been in the works for quite some time. It's actually stunning how we hear so little about this strategy, but it is one of the main vehicles they are using to target and silence opposition. And this strategy, they say it's a necessary tool to fight against domestic extremism, domestic violent extremists that threaten our democracy. Half the country that they want to label as fascist. But this is nothing more than a roadmap to suppress political opposition. They become so brazen in their abuses, they don't even try and hide it anymore. But we have to uncover the truth. We have to shine a light on the darkness within our government, expose the corruption that threatens our republic. So this is going to be a very important episode. It's time to take a stand against the corruption, demand accountability. More importantly, we have to put pressure on those who actually have the power of oversight when it comes to these institutions. I'll get into it all. Before I dive in, make sure you follow and subscribe to the P.A.S. Report podcast so you never miss an episode, and visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com. Before I jump into the main aspect of the episode, I do want to announce South Carolina Senator Tim Scott has announced he is running for President of the United States. He's going to seek the Republican nomination. It is expected that Governor DeSantis within the next few days is also going to announce this week that he's running for president. I'm not going to get into the heart of the primary right now. We still have a long way to go, even though time does come up quickly. I mean, it just goes. But I don't want to focus on it. As of right now, the former president is certainly the favorite to win the Republican nomination. He's up wide margins on all the competitors out there. The more the competitors that get in the race, the more President Trump will probably be able to expand his lead. As of right now, I don't see anything really changing that. So I'll keep my eyes open, and when it gets closer, that's when I'll focus on the primary more. On the other side, obviously, you have President Biden announcing that he's running for re-election. You have Robert Kennedy Jr. that is challenging. You have Marianne Williamson that's challenging him. Where that goes, again, it's still early. President Biden, obviously, the odds-on favorite to win the Democrat nomination, but given his age, given everything that's coming out about the Biden family business, you just never know what's going to happen, especially, listen, today's political environment, it is very unpredictable. And so we'll pay attention to it. When we get closer, we'll focus on it more. Another important thing going on, the debt ceiling talks are ongoing. You have all people out there going doom and gloom if Congress doesn't raise the debt ceiling. You know, we have to raise it beyond the $32 trillion because borrowing $32 trillion isn't enough. We have to borrow more money. We have to pay more interest on debt. We're paying $500 billion a year just in the interest alone to service that debt, and that's not enough. So we need to spend more money. It is completely ridiculous. Now, you have President Biden and Democrats. They want a clean debt ceiling bill. Republicans want spending cuts in return for lifting the debt ceiling. And I love all the fearmongers out there saying that if the debt ceiling is not raised, we're not going to be able to pay our bills. That's a bunch of nonsense. Understand, it's not like if the debt ceiling isn't raised that they just stop collecting taxes out of our paycheck. They're still going to collect our taxes. We're still going to have to pay those taxes. If you don't lift the debt ceiling, basically the government has to live within its means. It's going to have to prioritize where it's going to spend money. So when the president, and I understand why the president does this, you instill fear. We know fear is the great motivator. Just look at the coronavirus and how that worked out. But the president saying, oh, we're not going to be able to make Social Security payments. Well, they know that, older Americans, they're the ones that vote in the masses, that they come out. And so if you scare them enough, maybe you could scare them where they're not going to support Republican candidates. It's meant to bludgeon political opponents. But we could easily pay out Social Security claims. We could easily pay our debts. It's going to be other areas we're going to have to cut because we won't have enough money to fund everything. Is there something inherently wrong with that? Not really. I mean, how many of you out there, how many millions of Americans have to live within a budget, right? Where we can only spend what we're taking in. So it's a thing called fiscal responsibility. I'm not saying don't lift the debt ceiling. But we have to start tackling the massive spending that's going on. It's absolutely insane. And I'm not, these fearmongers out there, it's completely ridiculous what they're saying. Now, some Democrats are urging President Biden to ignore Congress, to raise the debt ceiling himself, as if Congress is irrelevant, right? I mean, what's the point of Congress? If a president can just do everything they want without congressional approval, why are we paying 535 salaries to members of Congress? And why are we paying all their staff? What's the point? Let's just announce that we have a dictatorship. This is not the way the system is supposed to work. They say the president has the constitutional authority to do this under the 14th Amendment, but that's nonsense. These people, they never read the Constitution. They don't understand the Constitution. They look at the Constitution as an inconvenience to power. And that's exactly what the Constitution is supposed to be. It's supposed to be an inconvenience to power. It's not supposed to allow one branch of government to usurp the power of the other branches of government. Article 1, Section 8, Subsection 2 clearly states that Congress is responsible for our nation's credit and debt. And these people, they want to mangle the Constitution because they don't have a regard for it. They don't like it. And I can't understand their short-sightedness. I can't understand their stupidity of pushing the 14th Amendment argument. Why do so many in Congress want to render themselves and the institution of Congress toward further irrelevancy? Haven't they given enough power to the executive branch? It's nonsensical, and it further pushes us towards authoritarianism. It's giving the president more and more power where decisions are made by the few rather than the many. And if they do push the 14th Amendment argument, and President Biden does act on the 14th Amendment, first of all, it wouldn't survive a Supreme Court challenge, in my opinion. But do Democrats realize that if it does survive a Supreme Court challenge, well, what happens when a Republican becomes president? They're going to be able to do the same thing. They're not going to like it then. And that's the stupidity of these politicians. They look at the here and now rather than looking at the long game. But in any event, we'll see where it goes. By next week, June 1st is when we hit our debt limit. Congress, President, they always wait till the last minute to secure a deal. I have faith that a deal is going to be reached. We'll see if there are realistic spending cuts or it's all superficial nonsense that we get. We'll see. But at some point, we do have to tackle the debt. Now, getting to today's episode, which is extremely important, we have to look at the FBI and we have to look at our intel and law enforcement agencies because we are witnessing an abuse of power that is permeating throughout our society, that has reached dangerous levels. Just the other day, we learned that the FBI improperly surveilled American citizens over 278,000 times. Over 278,000 times. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, in their filing, which was heavily redacted, so we don't even know the extent of this. We know that the FBI abused their power. The Bureau conducted 3.4 million warrantless searches of Americans in 2021 alone. 3.4 million. Now, when we look at it, this is part of Section 702 that permitted the FBI to conduct warrantless searches for data. This section was created to only seek foreign intelligence information and evidence of a crime. But we're talking about 3.4 million searches on Americans. That's insane, and it doesn't even account for the numerous times the FBI illegally accessed the NSA's repository on Americans. That's not me speculating. We know that because on several occasions over the last 2 years, the courts lambasted the FBI for illegally accessing the NSA's database. So we have that. Now we have the Foreign Surveillance Court calling out the FBI. This is on top of the court reaming the FBI and its leadership for manipulating evidence to spy on the Trump campaign. At what point do the alarm bells go off that not only are these gross abuses of power, not only are they violations of the law, but that the FBI has no respect for the judicial branch of government, where they think they could do whatever the hell they want without consequence, that they have the authority to weaponize the FBI to target Americans that they may not like or that they may disagree with. But see, no one is ever held accountable. So they do think they could do whatever they want. If you throw a few of these people in jail, you'll see how quickly they clean up their act at the FBI. You will see how quickly. And not for nothing. Republicans are to blame here too. Because guess what? Section 702 was up for renewal in 2017 to 2018. I'm pretty sure it was 2018. It was up for renewal. And even though the Republicans know that the FBI abused their power under Section 702, even though they know that the FBI used it to target a presidential campaign of a political candidate and then a president of the United States, even though they knew this, they still pushed it through anyway. They still approved it to be extended another 5 years. So the pox is on their house as well. This is not just a Democrat problem. It's a Republican problem as well. Both political parties are responsible for this beast because they don't hold these institutions accountable. And any single member of Congress, Section 702 comes up for a vote at the end of this year again. Any member of Congress that supports extending Section 702 deserves to be thrown out of office for the bums that they are. They see the abuses taking place. Section 702 needs to go away. It's an abomination, and it's obvious the FBI cannot be trusted with this power any longer. And I warned about how these abuses were becoming more and more brazen. The FBI is out of control, and they have pushed the boundaries to such an extent that it is now time to dismantle the FBI, or at the very least, severely curtail their powers and their funding. We cannot allow this to continue to go on. This is what the law enforcement apparatuses do in third world countries, in banana republics. And that's where we are right now. And that's where we're going to continue to be headed if we don't rein this in now. It shouldn't matter what side of the political aisle you fall on. When the FBI improperly surveils American citizens to the tune of 278,000 times, when they conduct 3.4 million warrantless searches, something is obviously wrong there. And this continued weaponization leads us down a dangerous road. And we are already there because we're going to take a quick break. But when I get back, I want to talk about the perilous situation that we are in and what it actually means for ordinary Americans. So sit tight. We'll be right back. P.A.S. report listeners, hurricane season is almost here, and the time to prepare is right now, not when the hurricane hits. When Hurricane Ida hit the Gulf Coast, it destroyed countless homes and left many without access to food and clean water. Millions lost power, some for weeks. The floods that followed the hurricane washed out roads, made it impossible for grocery stores to restock their shelves. Families were desperate. They were waiting for help that was slow to arrive. But what if you didn't have to rely on FEMA to provide for your family during a crisis? The answer is simple. Be prepared with emergency food kits from 4 Patriots. They're long-lasting and delicious food options rations are specifically designed to provide you and your loved ones with the sustenance you need when you need it most. And these food kits are hand-packed in the USA, last up to 25 years, compact inside covert storage totes, include a wide variety of delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners, and they're backed by thousands of 5-star customer reviews. 4Patriot Survival Food is not just for natural disasters. In today's world of uncertain supply chains and unpredictable emergencies, it's more important than ever to have a backup plan. Whether it's temporary power outage, a winter blizzard, rising food costs, you can rest easy knowing that you have a reliable source of food to see you through. And right now, you go to 4patriots.com, use code P.A.S. to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store, including the emergency food supply kits that are designed to last up to 25 years. Just go to 4patriots.com, use code PAS to get 10% off your first purchase of 4Patriot Survival Food. Welcome back, everyone. So now I want to go back to June of 2021, the National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism. I warned then that this is a political document. This is not an intelligence document. It's not a law enforcement document. It's not a threat assessment. This is a political document that attempts to target political ideology as domestic terrorism. It attempts to flag political ideology as domestic terrorism. I warn that they use vague terminology like anti-government, anti-authority sentiment, that if you express anti-government or anti-authority sentiment, you may be a domestic terrorist, that if you use certain terminology, you use certain words, or you have a certain position on a political issue, you may be a radical domestic violent extremist, that you may be guilty of inciting other domestic violent extremists take action against the government. And a few days ago, we had FBI whistleblowers actually discuss what's in the FBI's manual, where they look at things like if you're defending the right to bear arms, if you use 2A in a tweet standing for Second Amendment or a social media post, that you may be flagged as a domestic terrorist. And we learned this, but we already knew it, right? Because we've seen the FBI memos over the last couple of years. We saw the FBI memo as it pertained to labeling parents as potential domestic terrorists that need to have the Patriot Act used against them when they attend school board meetings. We saw the FBI memo, even though it's quote-unquote been rescinded, which probably hasn't, where they wanted to plant informants at Catholic churches because those Catholics could be domestic violent extremists. We even got word that the Betsy Ross flag is now considered as part of something that could be seen as offensive and incite domestic violent extremists. Take a listen to this FBI whistleblower.
And in your experience as a law enforcement official, does putting the word to or the letter to and A next to each other make someone more likely to be violent or law-breaking?
No.
And if someone signified the right, that they support the right to bear arms, was that also something in the symbol guide?
Yes.
And how about, this one really got me, the Betsy Ross flag. Was the Betsy Ross flag in the terrorism symbol guide?
It was.
And what about the Betsy Ross flag makes someone more likely to be a violent extremist?
I wish there was a reasonable explanation for that question.
There isn't. And people blew the whistle and said, this stuff is crazy. Americans are being targeted.
This is where we are as a society. I mean, you fly the American flag and you're going to be labeled. If you sit there and you defend your Second Amendment right to bear arms, you're going to be labeled. If you go to a school board meeting, you're concerned about what your children are learning, you're going to be targeted. This is insane. Just look at how the FBI has been weaponized. I mean, if you go and you firebomb a pro-life clinic, well, they can't find those terrorists. They can't find those domestic extremists. But if you have a prayer protest in front of an abortion clinic, we're sending in the SWAT team to come take you down and charge you with numerous crimes, as if those people represent the biggest threat to our country. And when you look at the numbers, the FBI is knowingly manipulating the domestic terrorism numbers. They're knowingly and artificially manipulating it to make it seem as if the situation is really worse than it is. You know, take all the talk about white supremacy. I spoke a little bit about it last week because President Biden at a graduation in front of a black church, shows you what a horrible human being he is. He said that, white supremacy is the biggest threat that those college graduates face. But when it comes to white supremacy, nobody could answer this question for me. When it comes to white supremacy, why don't we know anything about these organizations? Why don't we know the names of these organizations? Who's in charge of these organizations? What's the command and control structure of these organizations? What are their operational capabilities? If you look at the Italian mob, the FBI has an entire breakdown. Here's the boss, here's the underboss, here are the capos, here are the soldiers. When you look at groups like Al-Qaeda, Here's who's in charge of Al-Qaeda. Here are the lieutenant. Here are some of the soldiers. We break it down. MS-13, we have it all broken down. Well, why don't we break it down for these white supremacist organizations? You know, I see these videos of the Patriot Front, you know, the people in the khakis with the blue shirts that most of them look like FBI informants. They look like FBI agents themselves. Why, if they're such a threat, why isn't the government, the FBI, coming out there explaining who's the leader of the Patriot Front group? What's the command and control structure? How are they bringing in the money to fund operations? What are their operational capabilities? And what should ordinary Americans look for, right? I mean, when 9/11 happened, we came out with the See Something, Say Something campaign. We told people, hey, if it's 95 degrees out in the summer months and you see someone in a winter coat, that's a little suspicious. You might want to talk to an authority. If you see wires coming out of a bag, talk to authorities. Why isn't the FBI providing any information about what ordinary Americans should be looking for when it comes to these dangerous white supremacy organizations, or when it comes to the dangerous domestic violent extremists that are upon us? And it's because they lie, they manipulate, they inflate the numbers so that they could usurp more power, more authority, and so that they could abuse their power even more. Take a listen to this clip.
Statistics as it relates to January 6th, how they were inflating those statistics to make it look like there was a bunch more cases than there really was.
Well, typically, you would investigate January 6th as one case with lots of subjects, but instead the decision was made to open up a separate case for every single individual there, and instead of on paper investigating them from the Washington field office, spreading and disseminating those to the field offices around the country, and if the individual lived in that area. So it in effect made it look like there was domestic terrorism cases and activities that were going on around the 56 field offices, when in fact the cases were really all from Washington, D.C., and Washington field office had a task force that was responsible for calling the shots in all those cases.
Again, this was all predictable. We saw what was coming out of the FBI over the course of the last several years. We saw the National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism, where in Pillar 1 it stated that we're going to create these public-private partnerships, and in essence, you can have third-party organizations serve as the eyes and ears of government, that they're going to be running intel analysis. Groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center that have knowingly put out false and misleading information, they were the ones behind the movement to infiltrate the Catholic Church. We knew that was going to happen. We talk about the public-private partnership with the big corporations, the financial sector, big tech, all of them. They're all complicit in this, the banking system. They're all complicit in this. And if you looked at Pillar 4, well, it's all about political issues, that the way that you combat domestic violent extremism is through adopting a far-left progressive agenda and push it and shove it down the people's throats. So it's political from the start, and yet... And you now have these whistleblowers stepping forward because they're concerned, because actual crimes are being overlooked in order to target political opposition. And they're speaking out against this. Unfortunately, there is no support structure for them, because when you look at it, and this should serve as a really chilling warning to every American, because if they could do this to their own, I want you to understand that if they could sit there and spy on Americans with impunity, that they could disrupt our lives with impunity, that they could push back against Congress, that they don't have to listen to Congress, that they don't have to listen to the judicial branch. We've seen that. There's no regard there for that. If they try and take down their own from within, what does that tell you? What does that say to you? And here's one of the FBI whistleblowers explaining what happens when you speak out against the FBI.
All of the hardships you've gone through. If one of your really good friends, your former colleagues, came to you and said, I have this thing that is being covered up, and I think the American people need to know about it, what advice would you give them?
I would tell them first to pray about it long and hard. And I would tell them I could take it to Congress for them, or I could put them in touch with Congress, but I would advise them not to do it.
So you would legitimately try to protect one of your colleagues from doing what you have done?
Absolutely.
And how do you think that solves being able to shine light on corruption, weaponization, any kind of misconduct that exists with the American people?
It doesn't solve it. But the FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. And we are all examples of that.
I can't think of a more sobering way to end a hearing. I yield back.
So here is someone serving as a whistleblower that's warning that if you speak out against the FBI, that they will destroy you. They will destroy your life. These agencies, understand, have an enormous amount of power, and it's very difficult to defend yourself against these agencies, even if they come out with an accusation against you and you are fully vindicated. It doesn't make up for the loss of time, money, reputation, how many people have gone broke. Well, just take a listen to this FBI whistleblower.
It's currently in place at the FBI are clearly inadequate and must be reworked to protect whistleblowers and others who are inappropriately targeted. The FBI can extract whatever they want from me. I'm willing to bear that burden. I've sworn to defend this country from enemies, both foreign and domestic, even if that means sacrificing my life. I've lived that oath out since first enlisting in the Army, consistently saying, "Here am I, send me." My oath, however, did not include sacrificing the hopes, dreams, and livelihood of my family. My strong, beautiful, and courageous wife, and our 4 sweet and beautiful daughters who have endured this process along with me. In weaponized fashion, the FBI allowed me to accept orders to a new position halfway across the country. They allowed us to sell my family's home. They ordered me to report to the new unit when our youngest daughter was 2 weeks old. Then, on my first day on the new assignment, they suspended me, rendering my family homeless. They refused to release our goods, including our clothes, for weeks. All I wanted to do was serve my country by stopping bad guys and protecting the innocent. To my chagrin, bad guys have begun running parts of the government, making it difficult to continue to serve this nation and protect the innocent. But I, for one, will never stop trying, and I'll never forget my oath.
So he files a complaint with the Inspector General on what he sees that's going wrong within the FBI. The FBI decides to move his station, move him across the country, sells his home, shows up for work in his new station, and the very first day they suspend him. I mean, think about what type of scum you have to be to do that to someone. Because obviously it's clear that it was fully and only retaliation that mattered to the FBI. Again, it's out of control, and it shouldn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. Nobody should support this. But where are all the people within the FBI itself? I'm sorry, if you are silent in these abuses and you are participating in these abuses, you are complicit with the abuses. It used to be, we would say, that the senior leadership within the FBI is corrupt, and people understood that. But we would talk about the rank and file, that they're not the ones that are corrupt, it's the leadership. Well, the leadership has poisoned the whole agency. Okay, if you are part of the FBI, you should be speaking out against these abuses that are taking place. Unfortunately, what we're learning is that if you speak out against the FBI, you are going to be abandoned by your fellow agents. And we learned this in the hearing as well. Take a listen.
And I'd be curious to know, you had friends in the FBI. You were well respected. I mean, Mr. Allen, you're the Employee of the Year, for heaven's sakes. Have any of your friends reached out and tried to support you in this? And my point in asking that is I wonder if they're too scared. I wonder if they're scared to be associated with you. Now, I wonder if the FBI tactics of isolating you have worked. Mr. O'Boyle, have you had friends reach out and support?
Very, very few.
And why is that, do you think?
I think their First Amendment rights have been chilled as well. I know for a fact that my former supervisor had a meeting with my squad shortly after I was suspended, and he told them that I was going to be arrested, fired, and charged. So if that's not chilling, I don't know what is.
Mr. Friend?
Echo what Mr. O'Boyle said. I've had very few reach out to me, and those who have used encrypted ways to do it because they fear retribution.
They're afraid to reach out to you. Respected colleagues, people they've worked with for years, and they're afraid to reach out with you. It's very clear the FBI has been able to achieve that goal. Mr. Allen, your experience, former Employee of the Year?
I've had a few colleagues reach out who are no longer with the office, just to check in periodically, which has been appreciated. But other than that, I've been pretty much like ghosted by everybody. So
being afraid is not an excuse for remaining silent. There comes a time where you have to show courage, that you have to speak out against what's right. If the majority of people, this is what took place during the coronavirus. The reason the government was able to get away with all these abuses is because the majority of people just kept their damn mouth shut. If the majority of those within the FBI end up speaking up and speaking out, you can solve this problem. You can get rid of the senior leadership. You could get rid of the ideological corruption that has infected the FBI. But the majority aren't speaking out. One, because some of them are cowards and they're afraid to speak out. But number two, some of them actually agree with what's taking place because they are political partisan hacks. They are ideologues. They're not actual special agents. They're just ideologues that want to push a political agenda. When you're not getting support from those that you were friends with, you attended barbecues with, you may have gotten together with your families, and you're not speaking out in defense of them, you shun them as if they're a leper. that's on you. That's on you. And understand that what they're doing to these whistleblowers that are coming out and speaking against the FBI, where they're trying to crush and destroy their lives, how long before they turn on you within the agency? How long before that happens? If they turn on them, they're going to turn on you sooner or later if you don't toe the line. If you're not a lemming and just do what you're told. Grow a pair out there. And I think the saddest aspect of this whole thing, though, is the Democrat reaction to it and the media's reaction. Well, the media's lack of reaction, because most of the media didn't even cover this. They didn't even cover the whistleblowers and the testimony they gave. Instead, again, they just push a political agenda because we don't have a real press anymore. We now have political activists within the press. And so this story wasn't newsworthy for them because, let's face it, the FBI is pushing the political agenda they want. So to them, it's not worth it. But if you listen to members of Congress, so here's Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and here's how she's trying to diminish the idea that these are whistleblowers. Take a listen.
Mr. Chairman, I'm inquiring, and I was not.
And I've told you that when it comes to whistleblowers, you are not entitled to it. That's at the discretion of Mr. Allen.
Mr. Chairman, these individuals have been determined not to be whistleblowers. These are not whistleblowers. They've been determined by the agency not to be whistleblowers. Are you deciding that they're whistleblowers?
Yes, the law decides. Did you not listen to Mr. Levitt's testimony? Did you not read the law? The law decides that they are whistleblowers.
Now, understand that Congresswoman Schultz is one of the nastiest people in Congress. I mean, she's just a nasty person. And it's funny because, again, she's on the accepted narrative side. She's on the accepted political class side. Remember a few years back where you had Pakistani people that stole one of our laptops, and it was a whole big thing. And then you had Congresswoman Schultz, Wasserman Schultz, threaten the D.C. police chief that he better turn over the laptop. If not, there's going to be consequences. And yet we never heard anything else about that investigation, right? It was a little suspicious that they would have this laptop and access to congressional data from a staff member. It was just bizarre. So she's insulated, she's protected. Now she's returning to the favor to the FBI, right? Where she's saying that these aren't real whistleblowers because the FBI itself, the agency that they're accusing of abusing their powers, aren't deeming them as whistleblowers, which they most certainly are. Congressman Jim Jordan is right to point out that whistleblower status is given by law, not when an agency simply allows it. Yet she doesn't care. Now, it's people like her that are a problem because they are the ones that have the power of oversight that have not exercised their power of oversight in quite some time to rein in these agencies. So she is part of the problem. And then you have this gem from Congresswoman Linda Chavez. Take a listen to this one.
Mr. Allen, have you ever used Twitter? Yes or no?
I have utilized Twitter, yes.
Okay, and is your account at Marcus A970500645?
That is absolutely not my account.
Okay, that's not your account. Well, on December 5th, 2022, an account under the name Marcus Allen retweeted a tweet that said,
That is not my account, ma'am.
You haven't let me finish the question, sir.
Might have been the football player.
You haven't let me finish the question. And the time is mine. On December 5th, 2022, an account under the name of Marcus Allen retweeted a tweet that said, quote, Nancy Pelosi staged January 6th, retweet if you agree, end quote. Do you agree with that statement? Yes or no?
That is, I don't, no ma'am, that's not my account at all.
I'm asking whether you agree with that statement, yes or no?
Can you please rephrase the statement?
Yeah. Do you think that Nancy Pelosi staged January 6th? I just want him to answer
He'll answer. Yeah, he'll answer. I'm just telling you your time's up.
Do you believe that Nancy Pelosi, do you agree with the statement that this person tweeted that Nancy Pelosi staged January 6th? Yes or no?
No.
Thank you.
So here's a member of Congress that's trying to discredit one of these whistleblowers, doesn't even have the right Twitter account, but doesn't even care. Still uses it to try and malign him, even though Special Agent Marcus Allen is not the Marcus Allen in that Twitter account. She still tries to malign him and tries to hurt his credibility. So again, you have people speaking out, FBI agents speaking out against the government abuses, against the FBI abuses, and yet the Democrats are going to bat for the FBI. They're trying to assassinate the character of these whistleblowers. And that's something that we've seen repeatedly throughout government, that if you speak out against the government, you are going to have your character assassinated. Just look at the great Lord Fauci and how he tried to destroy the reputations of Dr. Bhattacharya, Martin Kulldorff, Dr. Gupta. So this is a big problem within government. It's time that we, the American people, actually call. I'm talking about picking up the phone, dialing members of Congress, getting someone from their staff to pick up the phone, and then filing a complaint. Talk about how you want to rein in the power of the bureaucracy, that you are dissatisfied with the abuses of power, that you want Congress to use its constitutional authority of oversight to correct the problem, that you want to see accountability within the system. Stop remaining silent. The silence is what's killing us. The silence is what's leading us towards this path of totalitarianism. And you could remain quiet for now. You could remain silent for now. But how long until it targets you? Again, this isn't about Republican or Democrat. It's not about conservative or progressive. It's not about political ideology. Those in power will abuse their power. The founding fathers understood that. That's why they chose limited government. We haven't been taught about government, so our knee-jerk reaction is to expand the government. Whenever there's a problem, we look to government to solve that problem. However, now that everything's a federal issue, now that we've given so much power to the federal government, it continues to expand. And it continues, and the abuses only get worse. So it's incumbent on us to put pressure on the political system. And if people do that, again, it shouldn't matter what your political ideology is. Because guess what? Your narratives may be accepted today, but tomorrow it could be those narratives that are targeted. To all you progressive folks out there, it's not like all these FBI agents and career bureaucrats within all the government agencies and departments. It's not like they're all like committed Marxists or something where they support your point of view. And so how soon is it before they see you as the threat? Open your eyes. Wake up. Because if this continues, believe me, it's only a matter of time before they target you too. I'm warning everyone out there, because this is the most critical issue that we face. This should be the biggest issue in 2024. It's not going to be. That's the sad reality. It's actually going to be one of the things that's least spoken about, but it should be one of the top issues. You know, it should be right there with the economy. It should be right there with immigration. Should be right there with foreign policy, because it's not going to be an external source that destroys the United States. We will destroy ourselves internally. Then the external sources come for the final blow. That's true of almost every empire that has ever existed. And if we allow the perpetual abuses of power by the government, nobody's ever held accountable, the situation will only get worse. Now, I hope you found the contents of this episode informative. Please share it with your family, friends, and on social media. Also, ratings, reviews, always welcome. Please leave the P.A.S. report a 5-star rating and take 30 seconds to write a review on any podcast platform that allows it. I want to thank you for joining me today. And I'm going to keep on this topic because I got a great guest coming in on Monday to talk about it. Someone that has seen the effect of the all-powerful bureaucracy, someone that has been censored by the all-powerful bureaucracy. So you're going to make sure that you want to tune into that one. I hope you enjoy your weekend. I'll be back on Monday with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast.
Have a good one. Bye.
Be sure to rate, share, and subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Also, visit PASreport.com and follow us on Twitter at PAS Report.